5 p.m. trip to help take students do extracurriculars home. But you're right, the other times of the day, the ridership is just so low that we have trouble justifying the service.
Okay, so we feel like we are maintaining enough AM and PM, and then with the activity route that would be to meet the needs of most of those students. Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I have two, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold, but I have two major areas that I wanted of concern, one that hasn't been brought up just yet, but I wanted to reaffirm and I think really just validate one of the speakers that came out that was saying that obviously the increase in the Eco Pass for him to travel as he does from downtown San Jose to De Anza would be troublesome, and I can only attest to that because I know that I used to pay him with high fives when he interned in my office, and so and I know that any young struggling student, certainly the increases that they may feel, and in this regard, I know certainly for the community colleges is more of an increase than one would have expected. So if staff can just be able to speak a little bit. I know you were able to bring this up last month, but in regards to what that phasing is going to look like.
Excuse me, in terms of the fair, that's not on the agenda tonight. Mm-hmm. That's going to come in June.
Okay.
So I don't think it's appropriate for us to just be discussing the fair policy tonight.
Okay, I can bring that up in June and.
It's right. Yeah.
No.
So General Counsel, is that true that we, yes, I
can bring it up in June.
Bring it up in June.
Note it as because I know that we presented on this last month and we were able to see that. I thought it would be helpful to be able to describe that phasing. I know that we did lose the students anyways, and so, but it would be helpful, I think, obviously, and if we'll present that, and then maybe that could be something that I can also transfer over to some of those students so that they can see the phasing, because I don't know if it's fully understood, and it does help, obviously, and that it's not going to happen immediately, overnight for them, and some of these students, because of community college, may be actually done by that time. Not to say that they shouldn't be looking out for the students that are coming after them, though. The other is in regards to the downtown area shuttle. And thank you for some of my colleagues here and the mayor for bringing up some of the concerns. And I know that Councilmember Diep asked, I think really one of the more important questions in page 6 here on the top really describes the dash, where I think in the sort of the replacement, as you will, or the recommendation to the Rapid 500. And I guess if anything, from the beginning, this is where I had some trouble. And if you just read the short description of the recommendation, it says, retain the draft transit service plan's recommendation to upgrade the dash to the Rapid 500 and to add a Rapid 500 stop at Almaden Avenue. And so in short reading of it, one would assume that the Rapid 500 is an upgrade of the dash. And as I described last month, I respectfully disagree with that statement and with staff's analysis and even the response that was provided to Councilmember Diep that would even describe that somehow the 500 is a transition of the dash. I would have been, I think, more pleased, and I think it would be more appropriate to just say we're eliminating the dash and we're also adding in a new service of 500 that is not a supplement or an upgrade of the dash. It's just a new service that's providing a great service from BART over to Dearborn, one that is not free, which is a major difference, obviously, to the dash. And the other major difference is that it didn't, as proposed, wasn't running on any of the streets that dash was running on San Carlos and San Fernando. So I didn't ever see how we could describe the 500 as the upgrade to that, especially when we know that, as we believe, right, and we're fairly certain that a number of these riders are students, more than likely wanting to get off in front of campus, and even if it's just a block and a half or a little wrap around City Hall, as most of us know from being students, those minutes count, especially when you're trying to rush into a class, and so and being dropped off there a block and a half, right? It does make a difference, and so if I were to describe to the student, hey, you're getting an upgrade on your service here of the dash that you may take from Dearborn, and then they determined, okay, I'm okay because I don't have to pay. I get the EcoPass and I'm fine, at least on the payment. But hey, wait a second, this wasn't much of an upgrade because I now just got dropped off a block and a half away. Maybe I need to plan my whole day 15 to 20, 30 minutes earlier now because I'm jumping from Caltrain, coming downtown, whatever it might be. So I think that was one of the most troubling aspects of it for me, was that as described, it made it seem as though it was an upgrade, and I think that they're just completely two different services. Now, you can begin to shift and mold that to look slightly more like the Dash. And Jim, in your presentation, and as the mayor highlighted again, you stated that you want to be able to look at that and now maybe even shifting from Santa Clara back down to San Fernando, which now it sort of does begin to resolve at least one of those issues. It's not a loop. It's not San Carlos and San Fernando, right? But it touches San Jose State now. Could drop somebody off right there again, right in front of MLK Library, right? It addresses half of that issue. It's still not free, but yet it will be free for, right, a number of riders, namely the students, and what we've heard, to reiterate today, which I appreciate that. It sounds like there's a little bit of a nuance, obviously, right, with some of the closer Caltrain riders from the one stop area, but I do believe that a number of the riders that are currently experiencing free ridership will continue to be experiencing free ridership to it, and if we can begin to try to make it actually look a little bit more like the Dash, and if one of those phases is moving it down to San Fernando, I think that's a step in the right direction. The thing that I think that obviously now is still not being addressed is just having a free downtown shuttle. And I bring this up because, and I did a little research to try to find out, well, what, urban hubs have free downtown shuttles. Did some homework. I won't list it off, but there's a number of, urban hubs that have and offer different types of free shuttles downtown, and all different walks. None of them are really the same. Some are subsidized differently. It's a whole different array. But nonetheless, what I saw, a reoccurring theme, was the emphasis on having some form of this free ridership, free travel throughout a downtown, and that hit some very, very prominent stops. Obviously, in our case, Diridon, San Jose State, right, Adobe, some of those places that we know that we're going to want to get people to and through. And if you can offer those services for free, it shows. And in some of these cities have done the ridership numbers. And as we've seen with our Dash, always has very high riders. And then what that tends to do is what we hope is that it leads people to other lines of our service. It entices them to take public transit, even when they're maybe done with their school day or their work day. And so it is an amenity that I think is really worthy of continuing to look at. And so, and we heard as well, and I know that it's, I think considering the number of adjustments that we're making and some of the lines that are being looked at, like the 181, I think that is a serious concern. We're not seeing an extreme outcry. We saw a number of community members that wrote in and called in, and I've been hearing a lot from community members. And I know the Downtown Association has really taken the lead in this, and as they should, as advocates for the downtown. And they've obviously wanted to be a part of seeing how we can't preserve a service like this. Also, in looking into the history, the city of San Jose, or better yet through the redevelopment agency, was a better participant in the past, right? And we looked at this as an amenity that we wanted to offer to our residents and have this amenity in the downtown. And a number of these other cities that I looked into, there was buy-in from the city as well. It wasn't totally on a transit agency. And so I would like to be able to look at something like that and see if there's enough time to do so. And as you said, you want to look at readjusting the line. I'd like to have maybe a little bit more of a concerted effort to have a conversation to see if there is, there's buy-in from my colleagues on the council and our mayor to see, is there a small amount of investment or subsidy that the city wants to put in? Can we get, and I know we went out and we had these conversations. We asked San Jose State, kind of briefly, and they were not interested in increasing above the 50,000. And we had the discussion with the San Jose Downtown Association, right, and talked about, is there another way or another partnership that we can have? And initially, right, there wasn't a ton of support of somebody jumping up right away. Jim Artbull, our DOT director, didn't say, yes, I'd love to throw money at this to create a solution here. But I would like to at least offer that a little bit more to see if we could not get more buy-in. And this would not necessarily be a replacement of the 500. I actually really like that. Nor would this, I think, be a preservation of the dash. I think I'm comfortable in saying, and what I think should have been said to me, is this is just, dash is being eliminated. We have another service.
Director Perales, if I could interrupt you for
Yes.
a moment. I think, first, I think you've made your point, and then also, when I come around to this, I will be talking about that point as well. So if you can move on to your next one.
Oh, this is the next one.
Okay.
The first one was the one that I
Okay. So I think we've heard that, and like I said, I will wrap it up into my comments, if you would.
Okay, yeah, so the additional ask was essentially to be able to go out and have that conversation, to see if we can't come to another agreement as 3 or even 4 parties, including private party, to have a free downtown shuttle where VTA is a participant. I know that the grant funding that we get, the Clean Air Grant, could be something that could be applied for as well. If it's not VTA that's applying for that, and there's another agency that we're partnering with to do that. And so if that can be incorporated into the direction, I would appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so I wanted to go ahead and play off a comment that Director Carr made about evaluation and KPIs. In the A&F meeting, we talked a lot about that and being able to, as they come back with their ridership growth models, of making sure they divide that out in a way that goes ahead and sets our expectations for what should happen in certain timeframes, because the growth numbers they talk about they'll tell you 2 years and things like that. And I suggested they need to set our expectations of how to read that data and understand it, so that we're not, if you don't get growth right away in 4 months, then what's going to happen. So I think there was some discussion, and I think Jim and his people are planning to come back with more about that. I'd just like to make a comment about what you were discussing of free shuttles and stuff. I would really like us to use terminology that says no fare versus free, because all of these things we talk about cost something. And if we want to go ahead and have something, as you were kind of alluding to, there's got to be a payment for it. So I would prefer the term no fare. I think that's a much better explanation of what it is that's going on. I think staff has done a really good job, and the work they've done for how to put this all together. It's a very complex thing, and it is going to get tied into our budget discussion with next week. As I mentioned in the budget workshop last month, we're going to need to be very disciplined. The Measure B money is already baked into this plan of what goes on. I think the mayor already mentioned some comments about being able to try and, when we look at this next month, I don't think he was talking about growing the number of service hours of what goes on. And just, if we get into a discussion where if anyone's looking at trying to add a service, I'm just going to keep beating on the budget parts, we have to look at what it's going to cost. And if we want to have something else, and that's an okay discussion to have, having something else means taking something else away. And I think we just have to make sure we maintain that disciplined thought around how we look at that. I'm not going to make any comments about budget piece and stuff like that, but we didn't touch about paratransit here. And I think we are trying to look at being able to try and do some preservation of what's there, but that's going to be a future discussion in next meeting when we talk about the budget for what goes on. But we shouldn't forget paratransit. And there have been a lot of speakers that have come up and spoken here today. I've received lots of phone calls, a lot of email of what goes on. And there's no way to get around, there are individual impacts to this schedule change of what we're talking about. But our objective was to go ahead and try and take a look at the overall network and what's going on and what we can do in the overall network for the opportunity to increase ridership and improve the service and take a look at ridership growth. So I think that's just the context with which I go ahead and I've been looking at the changes we're doing here and what is the objective we're trying to get out the other side. So thank you.
Madam Chair, thank you. I would definitely like to thank the staff for all your work. You came to several community meetings in the 5 West Valley cities and incorporated many of the comments and changed some routes, retained some, rerouted some, especially 61, 60, 56, 51, 37, 27. So there are a lot in those cities that you did a lot of work on. This is a little bit in the weeds, but I need to talk specifically about 23. I know you've increased 523, but what's happening with 23, it's similar to 88 that the residents were talking about. helps the students in one of our schools get to school. So we would like to increase the stops, not change the routes, but increase a couple of stops, because that will get them from the western part of the city to the school. I can send you an email with exactly what those stops are. And I wouldn't want those to happen during summer, because then you'll do it in summer and say there isn't enough ridership. So let's not do it in summer, but wait for August when schools reopen, and then see that we can add those stops at that time. So that is something I'd really like you to look at. The other question that I have is, how will we support the core connectivity that we talk about? Will there be an on-demand service? The mobility that we talk about, senior services, is there a timeline how we'll address this in the near future? The last mile, first mile that was mentioned by Member Carr.
Yeah, I hope over the next few months we start bringing this back to the board now that we've got through this process, and we can have understand what we need to do next with core connectivity. So that'll be coming back to the board over the next few months.
But will that be part of the same discussion, or is this what we decide today is final?
It would be an add-on discussion. Yeah, it wouldn't
Okay.
be part of this discussion.
So it will be an addition or an addition to this discussion?
Correct.
Thank you. Those are my comments. Thank you very much for all your work.
So, particularly out on the West Valley, we're dealing with a lot of growth and development, from Apple to Valley Fair to Santana Row, up and down Stevens Creek Boulevard and Winchester. Lots of potential development, as well as development that's actually taking place. One of the big dilemmas that we have is the disconnect between our transit and high-density development. So my first question to you is, in terms of your ridership projections, and particularly the increase, the 8 to 10% increase in ridership projections, how closely tied is that to the proposed development that's taking place, particularly in the West Valley?
And I don't have a West Valley specific number in mind, but we did look at development activity over the past 2 years and how that overlaid with an area with a half-mile buffer around the proposed frequent network. And we found actually quite a bit of overlap in the system, suggesting that where cities are developing is a good match for where the frequent service is going to be located. That said, there's a lot of coordination that can be done between cities and VTA, land use and transportation integration, designing buildings in ways that make it easy to access them by transit. That'll be rewarding for both those developments, the cities and VTA.
So assuming that coordination takes place, how flexible is your model to be able to make those adjustments based on projections of development?
Well, the ridership model looks at projected land use. We build it up with all the planned city developments and then look out, in the future. But obviously, we're looking at a couple of years out for that first set of ridership improvements. But our modeling also looks at 2035 and 2040. Sort of that's part of our long-range planning. So in the near term, it takes into consideration everything that's happening right now. Some of the things you mentioned, Apple coming online. We've been working pretty closely with the city in a lot of areas in your district regarding some of the urban village plans that are along Winchester and different parts of the city over there in Stevens Creek. And so those are all part of what our model does, is takes those and extrapolates out how transit service would improve.
I just want to make sure that we have an integrated, coordinated strategy in terms of development and transit. So.
And I think what Adam said is very important. We're developing a frequent core network of routes, and from a transit side, we would encourage cities to develop on those frequent networks, because that's where you're going to get the best transit ridership. That's where we're going to provide the most mobility options for the people that are coming into those areas. And I think we're working that way.
Great, thank you.
Okay, staff, tonight, this agenda item was about us approving this next transit system. All of our discussion so far has been about the bus routes. Could you just do me one favor? Could you quickly summarize the light rail changes so that we're all aware that that's also going to be part of this.
Sure, yeah, we tend to forget this a little bit because the bus system changes are so dramatic. However, we are making changes to the light rail system as part of this program. This is the map of the new light rail system that would go into effect when BART opens. So as you see, there's a new line that goes from Alum Rock to Mountain View. It's the orange line. And by the way, we're moving toward a naming system that uses line colors. And that's fairly typical in the industry. So that would be the orange line that would go from Alum Rock to Mountain View. And they're really, that's the key because we're hitting the Milpitas BART station, provides people a one-seat ride getting off the Milpitas BART station into the job centers of North San Jose and Santa Clara and Sunnyvale and Mountain View. The other thing that would go along with that is the green line, which goes from Winchester and currently goes all the way out to Mountain View, would stop now at the old Ironside station, and that would be upgraded to 15 minutes all day. It currently operates 30 minutes in the midday. The blue line is a current line that stays the same. The purple line stays the same, and the express, which is our yellow line, which goes from Santa Teresa now all the way up to Bay Point, would now terminate in downtown, and it makes 3 trips in the morning, 3 trips in the afternoon. Now it would be expanded using the same resources to make 6 trips in the morning and 6 trips in the afternoon. We found most of the ridership is headed toward downtown and significantly drops off past that. So this is part of the plan and that we've taken out to the public and is part of your action tonight.
Thank you very much. Okay, so what I'd like to do is try and summarize some of the stuff that we've heard tonight, and then I will entertain a motion. So again, a couple of things to make sure we're clear on is the implementation that staff is proposing is this whole thing would go into effect with the opening of the Milpitas and the Berryessa BART stations. What we're going to see between now and then are a couple of different things, but 2 that I wanted to highlight is, one, when we bring the budget to the board, we want to look at this in the context of the budget, so we will take another look at it, not to add, because more than likely in the budget, it's going to be the other direction if we have to do anything. So hopefully we won't, but we will revisit it at that point in time relative to the budget. The other thing is during the summer, we are also going to see staff bring back some information in terms of performance monitoring, sustainability policies, et cetera. Okay. In terms of some of the specific comments, the public highlighted a few routes. I believe, if my notes serve me well, we did touch on most of those. But the Rapid 500, what I've heard staff commit to is that they are still going to look at the specific alignment and whether or not San Fernando makes sense or not. The other thing I've heard staff say in response to the concern about when BART Phase 2, which is still years away in terms of construction, as part of any major construction program, VTA always looks at what it does in terms of disrupting services and what else we need to put in to ensure that people can move around construction zones, et cetera. And so something will happen, but we're not holding on to any one thing, thinking it's the solution. The solution will be tailored to the actual construction activity that's going on. Let's see. I think I've also heard at least one member talk about, while we said this is all being implemented all as one, I think Director Cortese, when he was here, said, boy, if there's pieces that can go in earlier, it sounded like he was open to that, but I didn't hear anybody else chime in on that. A reminder that in June, the fare policy is coming to us, as well as the budget. And then the last thing I wanted to comment on, several of you mentioned it, and so I'll just say it now before we entertain the motion. We do have, if you remember, we refer to it as a placemat that looked at all the different projects and how they relate to one another. There was a project that we referred to as a connectivity project. And that basically deals with this whole mobility solutions. And so that project needs us to make a decision basically on what we're doing with our transit network. And then we start looking at that connectivity, the mobility solutions. And staff is already working with a couple of cities. And so as Director Carr mentioned, Morgan Hill and Gilroy are trying to get ahead of this and working with staff. Palo Alto, as was also mentioned, is also engaged in discussions with staff. The West Valley cities are also doing that. Now, the thing that's in common with all of those is each of the cities have taken responsibility to try and initiate those conversations. And so every city is kind of at a different point. So San Jose, in response to the comments, Director Perales, San Jose is also free, and any other city is free to want to look at and have those discussions. To have the meaningful discussions, it helps for us to understand what the transit network looks like. But there's the caution on this. So a couple of things is, I think if this moves forward tonight, I do want to encourage staff to have those discussions. I would encourage any city who wants to start looking, but the cities also need to make sure that they understand they need to take the lead in some of this, okay? Because what we all bring from a city perspective, including those of us that represent multiple cities, is we understand a little bit more. We're closer to trying to understand and trying to help figure out what those routes and all should be. Okay, I want the cities to be taking the leads. Again, I think Morgan Hill and Gilroy has demonstrated that. Palo Alto, West Valley cities, encourage everybody else to do the same thing. And then staff, in terms of as we move forward with that, and as you start now the resources shift over to some of the connectivity, the thing is I would like to ask that you guys look at how are we going to develop criteria for these proposals? Because every city is going to have some creative ideas on what they're doing, what problem they're going to try and solve and all. And I think what I don't want to have is a rush to, he who's first in line gets their wishes. I think we need to look at, and after I think you've had some of these discussions and you have a little bit of an understanding of the lay of the land, hopefully you'll be in a position to start figuring out how do we start, I don't want to use the term judging these proposals. What's the criteria for us to evaluate the proposals? And the other caution that I would give all of us, in our council roles and county, is that when we look at these things, there's an element about capital, and capital is usually something where you kind of put it out there, and yes, you're going to have to maintain that. But I think when you're looking at these and wanting to engage in discussions with VTA, it's incumbent upon us to try and look at the ongoing operational cost, okay? Because yes, we have Measure B that gives us some funding, but we got to look at how do we do this and what is our sustainability, because I don't think we want to find ourselves putting pilots in place, and then finding out that we can't sustain them because we don't have an ongoing source of money. And again, when you look at each of the cities, everyone's got their different things. Some cities, Mountain View, I know, has a community shuttle. It's funded by the businesses, okay? So there's different models. We have to look at all of that. So with that, I'm going to ask if there is a motion.
Sure.
If anybody's prepared to make a motion.
I was gonna make a motion with some of the comments you made that I thought were motionable. You want me to try that? So,
Motionable.
so what I wanted to include was, I'm going to start with the last thing that you raised, which is to move forward with the staff's recommendations that is inclusive of coming back to the board with a framework for working with the cities. And I think that's going to be important just so that we have some consistency and we have clear expectations. That Route 500 be evaluated for the use of San Fernando Street, that this plan comes back to the board concurrent to the budget discussion for further refinement. You touched on the inclusion of Route 45, and that lastly, that the methods that are going to be used for course correction there's a clear evaluation framework that was raised by Member Carr, and I wanted to just make, so that would be a motion. I think I got most of your broad comments in that. Oh, yeah, I got most of your broad comments. That would be my motion, and then I want to make a comment to that motion. So we have a, good, thank you, we have a second.
And the clarification, I just want a clarification in terms of that, bringing back to the board, the further discussion about alignment. I think that was we're talking about the budget, right?
Of course, yes, that's further refinement after the budget.
After the budget,
Yeah.
thank you.
And it could happen concurrent, that's really up to the staff as to the best method of doing that. What I think we're trying to avoid is having a budget discussion that impacts the next network that's not, that the board doesn't understand when it takes the vote on the budget. Is that right with everybody? The last thing I wanted to add is that the reason I think the evaluation component for the routes that survive through the last refinement is that I think it's really important for the cities to play a leadership role in making sure that people use the routes. Because people have asked us to keep the routes, and I heard a number of people come and say, I'll do a better job of communicating, I'll make sure that people come out. But I think that if it's clear to the cities what we're going to be looking for, then it's also going to be clear that they have to help make sure that those routes are actually functional. And so I think that helps share accountability. So with that, I don't have any other comments.
Does anybody else want to make any comments regarding the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
And you know what, and before you leave your seats, I do want to take a moment. Thank you guys so much. This has been a long haul. You guys have done a stellar job throughout the entire process, but in particular looking at from the time we said we wanted the 85-15 and all of the community outreach. And having gone to a minimum of 3 of those, I know firsthand the professionalism, the courtesy with which you dealt with all the public, and the sincerity in terms of listening to their feedback and responding to it. You know, you warned us that it would probably be a tuned plan coming back, and that's exactly, your prediction was right. And I want to say thank you very, very, very much. Okay. So now let me find my notes and figure out where we are. So now we're going to go to 7.4. 7.4 is the information in terms of the, wait a minute. It's like, yes, this is the, item 7.4 is the draft plan Bay Area 2040, and Chris Augustine, our planning deputy director, is going to introduce this item.
Thank you very much, board members. I will keep my introductory remarks brief. I just wanted to let you know that VTA has been involved with this effort for more than 2 years, ever since MTC started their update. Our Envision process that we've conducted over the last 18 months, all the outreach, the extensive public involvement we had with that process resulted in a very comprehensive list of projects and programs. And the good news is all those projects and programs we submitted for our county are in the financially constrained part of the RTP, including all the Measure B projects we submitted. Lastly, I just wanted to give you a heads up that we are in the process of beginning an update of our own long-range plan. And among other things, our plan will certainly align with what MTC has outlined in their plan. And by way of example with that, I'd just like to highlight that their plan highlights, puts a lot of attention on housing needs, and especially the housing needs of lower income residents and the relationship that has with transportation. And Santa Clara County, with its passage of Measure A bond program last fall, sets us apart from other parts of the region and makes our region a model to follow, and we'll be addressing that in our plan as well. Lastly, our plan update will address all the rapid changes and new opportunities we see happening around us in transportation today, not only here but around the world. And we'll include a comprehensive assessment of our own transportation system, future conditions, and a much more robust vision section that we have will address new things, looking at the future, trends, map out a path for us to follow so we can be responsive to and benefit from all the changes and opportunities apparent to us all around us. And with that, I will turn it over to Dave Vaughton from MTC, and he'll walk you through the new Plan Bay Area, the draft plan.
Good evening. I'm Dave Vaughton, Senior Planner with MTC. I'm here today to give you a quick overview of Plan Bay Area 2040, which is the region's blueprint for transportation and land use over the next 20 plus years. We are currently seeking feedback on the plan, as well as the action plan element and the environmental impact report, all of which are in draft stage. The deadline for comment is June 1st, and we're going to be out here in Santa Clara County in the coming weeks meeting with the public. As I mentioned, Plan Bay Area is the regional transportation plan, is also the sustainable community strategy, covers the 9 counties of the Bay Area over a 24-year period, and with $303 billion in transportation funding. And there was an increased emphasis, as Chris mentioned, on the housing and land use aspect of it in this cycle, given the housing crisis. Just to provide a little bit of background, we know that we're in a major economic boom at the moment, which has increased prosperity across the region, but at the same time has created some significant affordability challenges. Over the 5-year period from 2011 to 2015, only 1 housing unit was constructed for every 8 jobs created. Although there's differences throughout the region, the numbers speak for themselves. There's a real supply-demand mismatch in the Bay Area. This has created ripple effects across the transportation system on systems like Caltrain and BART. Ridership is at record levels, far eclipsing the increase in population or jobs during this period. To provide a little bit of background, this has been a 2-year process to date. We are in the final 3 months of that process right now. We have had 2 rounds of workshops. We were here in Santa Clara County both of those times in 2015 and 2016 respectively. The plan that I'm sharing tonight, it reflects the preferred scenario that was adopted by the Commission and the ABAG board in November. Taking a high-level view at growth in the region, we're continuing to focus on priority development areas from the original Plan Bay Area. The plan forecasts that 46% of the growth would be in the big 3 cities, which includes San Jose, San Francisco, and Oakland. 33% in what we call Bayside cities around the Ring of the Bay, and the remainder in other parts of the region. Over 3/4 of household growth are forecasted to be in priority development areas similar to the last plan. Shifting to jobs, we expect 1.3 million new jobs to develop in the Bay Area between now and 2040. Much of that has already happened between 2010 and today. 80% of them would be expected to occur in either the Bayside cities or the big 3 cities that I mentioned before. Focusing specifically on Santa Clara County, the draft plan's growth pattern envisions 256,000 new households and 378,000 new jobs. We anticipate that 41% of the household growth and 39% of the employment growth would be in the priority development areas, many of which are along the light rail and BRT corridors here in the county. Shifting to transportation, this is a fix-it-first plan focused on maintenance and operations of our existing system. As you'll see on the pie chart on the screen, half of the dollars anticipated between now and 2040 would be allocated towards operations and maintenance of the existing system. Another 22% going towards operations and maintenance for our roadway system, and the remainder going towards modernization and expansion projects. In the end, only 10% of dollars would be going towards expanding the existing system. Again, focusing on some high-profile projects here in Santa Clara County, projects including BART to San Jose, Caltrain electrification and frequency increases on that line, express lanes on a suite of highways here in the South Bay, as well as more medium-sized investments such as extensions to light rail corridors and new BRT lines are all included in the plan. Another major project also included in the plan is the high-speed rail segment here in the San Francisco Bay Area, which south of Dearden Station would operate in its own right-of-way. Now, the plan does meet many of our goals, but it falls short on others. These are the 13 targets that the Commission and ABAG established to guide the development of the regional plan. You'll see that the draft plan achieves 5 of those goals and moves in the right direction on 4 more. But there are very severe challenges in which the plan is not able to turn the trajectory that we are experiencing, including on issues like displacement risk, access to jobs, and affordability in the Bay Area. And that is why we've developed an action plan component to address some of those shortcomings. The plan is available online. We've also shared the plan on a USB drive with all of you. You can access it on the website. There are 5 key components to the plan document, And I just want to emphasize one of them, which is the action plan element. We're identifying some policies, short-range policies for the next 4 years to really try to bend that curve and deal with that, those targets that we're falling short on. We've identified 3 key areas for the action plan to deal with in the short term. One is obviously the housing issue that's become so critical with our affordability crisis. In addition, we want to tackle the issue of economic development and also expand our work in the area of resilience. I'm not going to go into all the specifics here, but just to highlight, we are focusing on addressing some of the housing challenges through an effort that's known as the Committee for Affordable and Sustainable Accommodations, or CASA, which will be kicking off in the next couple months. And that will help us identify policies and strategies to really deal with the housing crisis for both affordable housing, but also housing for folks of all income levels. In the area of economic development, the plan is recommending the creation of an economic development district for the 9-county region. This strategy will provide recommendations for expanding businesses, workforce training, housing and workspace issues, and infrastructure. On the topic of resilience, the draft action plan recommends developing a governance strategy for the region on how we implement resilience projects, given the large number of agencies in this realm. Beyond governance, the draft action plan also recommends stronger policy leadership on resilient housing and infrastructure. Just to highlight a couple dates on this slide relevant to Santa Clara County, we will be having a hearing on the draft EIR for the regional plan in San Jose on the 16th of May, and then we will be having an open house on the 22nd of May. With that, I just want to highlight again that we're looking for feedback, and I'm happy to take any questions at this time. The public is encouraged to submit comments to us by the June 1st deadline, rather, at which point we will look at those comments, make revisions, and we're moving forward with the target date of adopting the draft plan, the final plan, in late July.
Thank you very much. Mayor Liccardo.
Thank you. I just want to be clear about the procedural posture here. Are we voting in any way to take a position in any way as a board, or are we simply giving feedback? Okay. Yeah. Good to know. Thank you. I know I've expressed this view at the MTC, and I'll continue to do so. There is a fundamental challenge in the Bay Area that has been created by the great separation between where the housing gets built and where the jobs are. And until there is a much more assertive posture regionally from ABAG, now MTC, and certainly this agency as well, about ensuring that if cities want to expand job capacity and they are already not providing sufficient housing for that job capacity, that there should be mechanisms which provide strong incentives to allow those cities to grow where they take the responsibility to provide housing. And whether that takes the form of impact fees on growth and jobs, or stronger ties between reallocations and transportation funding, whatever that might be, there need to be some clear mechanisms, or we're going to continue down this path of worsening affordability of housing, of worsening traffic on our freeways, and worsening access to jobs, and that's reflected, I think, here. And so I appreciate very much the work of the staff, MTC. I know there's a lot of challenge. I know we have a hard enough time certainly corralling the cats in a 15-city or town county, and you've got to do it in 99 jurisdictions. There's 101, I can't remember, 101, yes. Not an easy job, I get it, but I am not supportive until we have harder, clearer mechanisms that require cities that want to continue to grow jobs, these are overwhelmingly suburban cities, that they also have to take responsibility for housing.
Go ahead.
I couldn't agree with you more, Mayor, and while I was sitting on the ABAG board, I voted no against this plan because it does not fulfill many of the assertions that our mayor has made, plus it radically underfunds cities that are trying to fulfill housing like our city, and gives most of the dollars to two Bay Area cities north of us here that have a lot less roads, a lot less miles of public transportation, and I'm extremely not supportive of this plan, and I want to make that position clear.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I was just a little confused when I had looked at the slide 11 when it talks about meets our environmental goals, and I look at the targets achieved, and I realize I'm coming into this a little late in the game, and I'm not familiar with how those targets were set, but I look at like most of those 5 of those, and I'm not sure I would say that we've achieved any of those, particularly here we're all talking about housing, and you're listing adequate housing as a target achieved. I would love to know how that, and I could make comments about all the rest of them too, but can you explain a little bit about how you can say that, unless it was an incredibly low bar that was set, that we've met a target for adequate housing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's obviously an actual performance measure and target sitting behind those categories. To get at the specific target you're talking about with adequate housing, the goal there is to build enough housing between now and 2040 to ensure that there's not further growth in commuting. And the plan does identify locations for that housing to make sure that we're not having additional folks who have to commute over the hill from San Joaquin County to the Bay Area. That does not mean we've solved the housing crisis. As you can see with the other measure under wrong direction where it says housing and transportation affordability, the housing costs are forecasted to increase by 13 percentage points as a share of income over this period. So there's an adequate number of housing units, but they remain quite unaffordable.
So are you saying that you think that you've identified adequate locations to place that housing, but not that housing is actually in the pipeline or it has been built?
Well, it is a long-range plan. So these are targets not to measure how we're doing today, but how we are forecasted to do between now and 2040.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, I would have a speaker who'd like. Go ahead.
Oh, I just have one. So first of all, thank you, and I apologize for keeping you waiting. I knew this wouldn't be quick, mostly because I've seen it at a regional level. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about any sorts of incentives or strategies that MTC is considering to address the issue that Mayor Liccardo raised.
Well, let me turn to the housing slide here. This is the 800-pound gorilla of our action plan is the housing issue, right? And you can see that there's some specific items up here, number 4 in particular, using housing performance to prioritize funding. That, there certainly is a lot of debate that's occurred related to that. We've expanded the housing component through the One Bay Area grant program to really start to create that nexus between housing and transportation. But there are folks who think that more can be done. And so what I think you'll see over the next 1, 2, 3 years is more discussion about that as new funding opportunities become available, such as the Regional Measure 3 proposal, to look at how housing can be woven into that fabric. There's going to be a lot of debate on the regional level, but I think there's precedent for that now with OBAG, and we'll see kind of where the policy lands. I guess I would say. So I guess that would be my response to the question of how housing and transportation are being knitted a little closer together. It is important to remember that the next cycle of Plan Bay Area will include RHNA, which this cycle did not. RHNA is on an 8-year cycle, so this was a minor update to the original plan. So as we begin that process in the next year or so, there's going to be a lot of debate about how we look at the RHNA process. How do we, again, try to tie that more closely to jobs and transportation?
Yeah, and I think of RHNA as being for lack of a better word, it's just a plan. I mean, everybody really, it's so fascinating to me. People really stress out about it, but there's really no no teeth, no result. It reminds me a lot of when my son was little and I would say, I'm counting to 3. And there's like, and he hated the 3, but it was, don't tell him that there was not a lot I could do there. But but that's exactly how I feel about Rena, right? I feel like it's like we count to 3 and then, I'm not kidding. So I think one thing that would be helpful, at least as ideas come up, I'd be really interested in better understanding the carrots and the sticks, and also if we have taken a look at if there's any other region that's done this anywhere in the country better than we are, maybe not, but if there was someone who's figured out how to structure laws in a way that really do, or policies and practices that really do enhance our ability to address this, because and I say this, and I don't mean to be not favorable to other cities, but I say this recognizing that I did one of the convenings for ABAG here and met with a lot of cities. Some of your cities were at the table, and people were very clear. They said, look, housing destroys the character of our community, so we're not putting any more housing in, which leaves a handful of cities that have, and they are so responsible that it's kind of appalling that there's no way to reward them, and especially the communities that are building dense housing, and not a lot for it. So, thank you.
Board Member Hendricks.
Yeah, I have 2 quick questions. One is, so while we're on housing, can you just double click on item 3 there? I'm really interested in that word spur. And what is behind that? How do you do that?
Well, I don't have all the answers tonight. I mean, basically what we're saying is we are developing a blue ribbon committee to answer all of these questions, to develop the policies that.
Okay, I got you. So to follow on to what Director Chavez was just saying here, do you have something in so I sit on a city council, and every time I go ahead and I approve a new housing development project, I have people who say, no, I shouldn't. Do you guys have anything as part of your plan, some education program to kind of reach out to the broad base, kind of as Cindy was mentioning, of the people who say, no, I don't, housing's good, we need more of it over there. And how do we go ahead, and what is the plan to try and change and reach out and do education, embrace to where people are trying to say, yes, we should be more inclusive of that? I mean, is that part of your overall strategy, or is that left to the cities?
Well, the timing for this work really couldn't be better. MTC and ABAG are merging at the moment, and one of the things ABAG has done quite a bit of is coordination with local agencies and building infrastructure at the local level, working with cities, working with counties. So we expect that as we go into the implementation of this plan, that we'll be doing even more of that with the combined resources of both agencies. So I think over the next year or two, as we really start the implementation of this plan, the MTC ABAG combined staff will be out working with cities to try to help solve some of those challenges.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about working with the cities and the counties. I'm talking about what do you guys plan on doing to reach out to the residents and the community members? Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of going here, how do I get you guys in front of me as a shield? And you're the ones communicating out there and explaining, the need and the requirement of how this has to happen. Or it's, here we're asking you, Mr. and Mrs. City, to go ahead and do that. And that's where some of us have been already. So it's just as a thought to be able to try and help, because I really think a lot of this has to do with being able to get a lot more communication and a lot of getting people to understand the real challenges and needs and how these things relate to possible solutions, not only in the over there, but also in their near areas as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I have to echo what you said, Member Hendricks, because everybody knows in my city we had a ballot measure and a countermeasure, and the citizens just don't want us to build anything. If we have a proposal, there'll be a referendum. Even if we have a citizens advisory committee to try and discuss how many units we want to put, they don't even want to have the advisory committee. So it's really impossible to go ahead and say we can build so much. It always comes back to transportation. That is the biggest issue. And we don't have BART, we don't have Caltrain, we don't have light rail. So our surface streets are really back during commute hours. And everybody uses Waze, they use the side streets to get out of the freeways. It is really bad. So you can't really say that, yes, let me put another 200 homes here when you can't even get out of your home in the morning. So we need a plan which talks about transportation first. Are you putting jobs where the transportation is, or are you putting homes where the transportation is? And if we cohesively discuss that first and explain that, like Member Hendrick said, the public may be a little bit more willing to go with you. If we have job centers with transportation, let's analyze that. If we have residential centers with transportation, let's analyze that, because otherwise we have the, again, first mile, last mile problem and gridlock. So, which is why this plan does not appeal to me. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna take our two public speakers, and then I'll give board members another chance here. Omar Chatty and Roland LeBron.
I'm glad I only have 2 minutes. I am so angry. So I've been around here fighting for transportation for almost 40 years. Steve Heminger needs to be fired. He's the MTC guy who has brought this on. He's an embarrassment to his predecessors, Larry Doms and the others. This is a Soviet-style plan. There's no performance measures that there should be. It's terrible, and it doesn't consider the reality. I listened to KMJ, which is the Fresno station. They're talking about doing housing down there where $200,000 houses and having people take high-speed rail to work in this valley, and there's no consideration of that. If you read the Mercury News the other days, there's a whole talk about exurbs, and people quit their jobs here in the valley because they can't get here because of the roads. And what do they do with the roads? 10% to existing traffic. And yet people are dying on Pacheco Pass. State Route 130 has been planned for years. The biggest warehousing facilities are just outside the other mountains, and State Highway with Amazon, Kohl's, and everything else, and we don't even plan for them. I mean, this is crazy. This is crazy stuff. Every day you listen to the to Interstate 580, the traffic jams on 580. And what are they going to do? They want to do toll roads. You know, doggone it. I'm sorry. I'm so emotional. But, you know, the previous plans of all this is no performance or nothing. So, I mean, you know, this guy needs to be fired. We're not in North Korea, but this plan is a North Korea plan for motorists, especially those motorists who can't commute, can't carpool. And we're creating a caste system with the toll roads. It's terrible. And everything that the Cupertino person said is exactly right. There's no planning for the roads. You have to plan reality, or you put a cap on your development. I mean, Morgan Hill's doing that, Gilroy's doing that, and we could do that in Palo Alto's suffering because they don't have a cap. Okay, thank you for the time, but this is terrible. And if you ever have a chance, go see Stanford Theater next time they play Ninotchka, either the Sid Charisse one or the Greta Garbo version, because you'll see what Soviet-style housing is like. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Roland?
Wow, that one's going to be tough to follow, but I'm going to be extremely quick, and through the chair, I would like to ask a question from the speaker. It's whether the speaker took BART, or whether the speaker took Caltrain, or whether he actually drove down here to this meeting, and if he drove, why, and you can use the rest of my time to provide an answer. Thank you very much.
I will not put you on the spot, but if you wanted to volunteer that information, that's completely up to you.
Well, I can say I took BART and VTA, so I found it quite pleasant, and I didn't have to deal with the 101 drive.
Thank you. So, any other comments from my colleagues up here? Otherwise, Mr. Vaughton, thank you so much for coming down, and thank you for your patience in sitting through our next network discussion and such. So thank you very much. Okay, board members, we still have, we're not done yet. We still have item 8 and item 9, so we have some other items, and then we also have a reminder, we have closed session. So, General Manager, would you like to
deal with other items?
I would love to share some items and initiatives that we're taking. Good evening to all. Before I get started, I really want to take this opportunity to thank the Board of Directors for approving the transit service plan. You all have, you gave us extremely great guidance at the very beginning of this process. You supported the engagement of Jared Walker to help us through the process, and what we have brought to you what we believe to be a sound approach to a great opportunity to really take back our bus and light rail service and bring it to a level that would in fact start to provide the right access to individuals and increase ridership. So we look forward to continue working with you throughout this journey. I also want to punctuate, add some thanks to some additional people who were part of this. In particular, Adam Berger, who gave the presentation. He has been shepherding this process from the very beginning. I also want to recognize Brandy Childress and her band of road warriors, because they set up every single one of these community meetings. They staffed the meetings to late hours in the evening, most of the days of the week over the past few months. We had over 100 meetings. So I just wanted to also recognize them, and of course our communications team, in addition to planning and program development, who gave the presentation, delivered, put together all the materials, and responded to the thousands of inquiries and recommendations that were brought by the public. So the first thing on my report, of course, is ridership. And what we've done for you, and you should have a copy in your folders, as well as the public behind you, is I wanted to show for the past 12 months what ridership has looked like, so that we could go back to 2016, see where we are in 2017. And over that period of time, we see that there is a decrease overall of 10%. And every month when I discuss ridership, I talk about the decrease, and I compare it month to the year prior. But one silver lining is that as we look at ridership in March of 2017 and compare that against February of 2017, there has been an increase in ridership. So even with the decrease, we had an uptick difference between February and March, which we hope is a sign of better things to come. But I strongly believe that is in reviewing our network of services, that is bus and rail, where we're going to see the major gains. One exciting project that we're working on now is the real-time information signs. We're talking about the opportunity for those who use our bus system to be able to walk up to what looks like a tablet. It's the size of a tablet on a pole where our bus stop sign is, and see in real time where the next buses that serve that particular stop, what their locations are in comparison to that destination, to that location. These real-time information signs have been a total success. We have them at 4 locations currently: Alum Rock at Jackson, Ocala and King, at Story and King, and we're going to be installing one at the River Oaks and First Street stop, which is right across, right outside of our River Oaks campus. The other beauty about these tablets are that they are powered by solar energy. So they're sustainable, they provide real-time information, and they will be coming to a bus shelter near you as soon as this pilot is completed. From the real-time information sign, I want to transition quickly to the light rail rodeo. We held our light rail rodeo. For those of you who've been with us for several years, you know that in our public transportation industry, we hold both a bus and a light rail rodeo. So the light rail rodeo, we competed within VTA, and the top 3 placements, the first, second, and third place winners, will then compete at the national light rail rodeo that's going to be held as part of the American Public Transportation Association's rail conference in Baltimore in June. So the first place was taken by Pedro Pete Diaz. Second place was Rick Fredericks, and the third place was Jose Ramirez. So we're very excited. We came in second last year nationally, and we're hoping for first place. So thanks to them, and we all know they're going to do a great job. Moving along, this past week, we celebrated Bring Your Child to Work Day, and we had 60 kids that joined us. It was a terrific day. Lots of activities were planned. We want to take this opportunity to thank Captain Lara and the Sheriff's Office because they brought the live bomb robot and did a demonstration, and the kids were just blown away. We also put the kids... No. Didn't think about it, but you're right. They weren't quite blown away, literally. They were just excited about this robot. And we also put them on our light rail and took them to Milpitas so they could see the BART station construction across the way. I want to move right along because we have another presentation I want to share with you all at the end. The Regional Business Diversity Program. We have partnered with Santa Clara County to reach out to minority-owned, women-owned, LGBT-owned, and disabled veteran-owned businesses to help them navigate the process of contracting with the county and VTA. So our program has been very successful. I want to take this opportunity again to thank the board for allowing us to create this program a couple years ago, and then to add the LGBT and disabled veteran enterprises last year. We're going to be participating next week with the Business Connect program on May 11th at the County Auditorium, and introducing and kicking off our Regional Business Diversity Program at that event. Then I may have mentioned this to some of you earlier at our governance and audit meeting, but it's worth repeating. We are also celebrating Bike to Work Day. It's going to be on May 11, and together with the City of San Jose and our partners at the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition and others, we're going to be kicking off Bike to Work Day at Martin Luther King Library in downtown San Jose. And from that point, we're going to be riding along the Santa Clara Street to the Guadalupe River Trail and all the way up to River Oaks campus. So all of you that would like to join us, be there at 7:30 for the kickoff. There'll be a series of stations along the way so that you can grab a bottle of water, some fruit, take photos. It's going to be exciting. We've been doing this for 3 years. This is going to be our fourth Bike to Work Day, and it's been really a lot of fun. It also gets us a little bit of the exercise in the morning. I believe I may have skipped over Bernice. Is that what I did? No, not yet. Okay, so then next, what I thought would be helpful if I had both Captain Lara, who's going to be talking about security and what has transpired over the last 12 months, followed by Rufus Francis, who's our Director of Safety. I also want him to cover safety events over the past 12 months and talk a little bit about some of the training and other activities that we're taking, that we're putting in place. So with that, Captain Lara.
So the first slide up here is, should look familiar. This is what I present every month. So this is the April and March, April statistics as they compared to March. So in April, we had 143 incident reports and 113 arrests. The next one is at the general manager's request. We looked back 12 months. So we looked April 2016 through March of 2017 to analyze the crime that we've seen on the system. So from April 2016 to March of 2017, we took a total of 1,108 total incident reports and arrested 982 people. Now, in fact, we saw an increase in just about every category over the last 12 months than we did at the same time frame in the previous year. This slide shows one category. It kind of highlights one category where we didn't see an increase. This slide shows that total incident reports were up 23%, total arrests were up 26%, but serious or violent offenses was down 15%. So it's a little bit of promising news. Of course, this is, it's something we got to stay up on and continue to monitor. But when we're seeing the uniform crime reporting, the FBI reporting, serious or violent crime is increasing across the nation. We've seen recent reports in BART, so this is promising for us. So why is this? If you recall, back in 2016, I reported to the board a troubling increase in violent crimes, and I presented a plan to address it. And I really want to thank the general manager and this board for the continued support in executing that plan. The efforts included collaboration with San Jose Police and other local law enforcement. We conducted surge operations in key areas last year. It included redeployment of Allied Universal Security and vigorous follow-up from our detectives that even led to Southern California going after suspects that committed crime on transit. A complete staffing evaluation was conducted, and the contract with the Sheriff Department was amended, putting more law enforcement on the system long-term. So with more cops on the system, you see an increase in self-initiated activity, an increase in reports, an increase in arrests, but we've seen a decrease in serious or violent offenses. And again, while it's still early, and while this will be a continuous effort, it is a good sign that we're seeing a reduction in violent crime. And that concludes my report.
Good evening. I'm going to share on the bus and rail incidents. So this graph shows some of the highlights of number of accidents we had starting from the fiscal year 2017, which is July of 2016, as of to date. The highlights are for the 3 months, July, October, and February, we have only one accident. For 2 months, which is August and November, we had 4 incidents. And for 2 months, we have 5 incidents, which is January and March. And December was the highest one, which we had 6 incidents. Now, what were these incidents? If we look in the next chart, it will show these are the types of incidents we had. Train versus vehicle, bike, pedestrian, shopping cart, trash cans, gate, OCS, and pedestrian fatality. If you look at the total, 18 from July through December, 16, and 11 from January through March. A total of 29 accidents, averaging at approximately 3 accidents per month. Next slide is about the bus incidents, and it shows from July, August, September, October, all the way up to March, a total of 435, averaging approximately 48 accidents per month. And what are those accidents? We can see that the types of those accidents. These are the types: vehicle, bus versus vehicles, then trees, poles, bikes, and all you can see from the chart. So what are we doing if we know that these are the types of accidents and these are the numbers? So these are the actions which we are taking. We do safety outreach. We do safety outreach with our customers and the public. We work with marketing. And we believe that safety is the most important factor in everything we do at VTA. Safety is a shared responsibility between our employees, contractors, customers, and the public. And if everyone play their role, we can have a very improved safety performance. That's why we do outreach to our customers and the public about safety. The week of May 8th, we are doing an outreach program with flyers and brochures, and this is in particular about the BRT third rail safety. We have done the similar kind of outreach in the previous month for grade crossing safety. Other steps we are taking: safety bulletins and notices, safety information on the hub. We prepare material for safety tailgate meetings which are conducted at the divisions. We evaluate facilities, construction sites, and incident locations for safety improvements. As we shared last month, the improvements we are making for improving bus stops and downtown light rail areas. We are working with our committees to improve those situations. We participate in safety presentations at employee forums held at operation divisions. We had participated in 8 forums so far, 3 for the bus divisions and 1 for the rail. We also encourage and support our Operator Safety Awards program. And at this time, we have at least 21 operators, they have achieved 1 million miles with no preventable accident. 1 million mile equates to 40 times around the world or 2 trips to the moon. Back, 2 trips going and coming back. We have 6 operators, they have achieved 2 million miles, and that is equate to 80 times around the world and 4 trips around to the moon. And we have 3 operators, they have achieved 3 million mile award, and that means 120 times around the world and 6 round trips to the moon. So we have a very good safety record, and our operators are doing their best. Although we do have accidents, and we try to make every effort to eliminate those conditions and hazards which can cause accidents. This concludes my report.
Madam Chair, if any board members have questions, Mr. Camus?
I just have a quick question. Just in reviewing the number of bus incidents, is there anything more that we could do to prevent hitting trees and poles? Perhaps putting a sensor on the right-hand lane, or some kind of sensor that'll say, hey, you're too close, like I do on my backup camera.
We just have formed the committee with engineering and operations, and we're going to look very soon. The committee has been formed, and exactly on the same item. There are some tight clearances, there are some poles, some signage which has been put in by cities. I can understand those things. Those things can be eliminated, and we are working on it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further questions? No? Thank you very much. The next item on my report is the Government Affairs update. Kurt Evans will be delivering that.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Kurt Evans, the Government Affairs Manager for VTA. During your last Board of Directors meeting in April, we were keeping our eyes on the progress of SB 1 as it was being voted on by the Senate and Assembly. Today was another movement, a day of movement, this time at the federal level. In the written Government Affairs report before you, I noted that the House passed the FY 2017 Omnibus Appropriations Bill yesterday by a strong bipartisan vote after about a week's worth of drama as to whether a deal could actually come together. This afternoon, the Senate did the same thing. So the bill is now headed to the President. All indications are that he will sign the bill into law, finally putting the appropriations process for the current fiscal year to bed. And it's good news all the way around for transportation. For highway and public transit programs that fall under the Highway Trust Fund, including those formula programs from which VTA receives money, the Omnibus Appropriations Bill provides the full amounts, including the increases in spending that were authorized in the FAST Act. The Capital Investment Grant Program, which is a little bit of an odd duck because it's a general fund program, not a trust fund program, will receive $2.4 billion under the Omnibus Appropriations Bill. That's actually $100 million more than the amount authorized in the FAST Act. Under the Capital Investment Grant Program, the bill includes $100 million for BART Phase 1, which is consistent with our full funding grant agreement. It also includes $100 million for Caltrain electrification. Switching to Sacramento for a brief moment, now that SB 1 is behind us, the next big effort in transportation for those of us in the Bay Area is Regional Measure 3, the proposed toll bridge increase being pursued by MTC. The legislative vehicle to provide MTC with the statutory authority to put RM3 on the ballot is SB 595, which is being authored by Senator Jim Bell. Right now, the bill is basically a shell, meaning we still need to work out the details. How much would the toll increase be? When would it go to the voters? What would the expenditure plan look like? And so on. As we work out those and other details, they will get amended into SB 595. Given the way that the legislative process deadlines stack up for keeping bills on a one-way track, it's likely that that's going to happen when the bill goes over to the Assembly. That completes my report.
Are there any questions for Kurt? Mr. Camus?
You said we got $100 million for the the Caltrans electrification?
For the Caltrain electrification project, yes.
Yeah, how much were we looking for?
It's my understanding that $100 million is the number that's reflected in the full funding grant agreement for the project, which still needs to be executed by the administration.
Great news. Thank you.
Mayor Liccardo?
Just to be clear, though, if we don't get a signature from the Secretary of Transportation, we don't get the $100 million.
I think, yeah, I mean, you're getting into some gray area. Go ahead, Jim.
Basically, that's correct.
Okay.
Ricardo.
Yeah, and I appreciate, I know this is messy, because I understand there was some action taken in Congress. Is there any path by which we can get the $100 million without getting an FFGA? No. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is a referral that the board had given to the staff several months ago, and it has to do with the procurement process that we follow. So Tina Yoke, our procurement manager, in addition to Tom X, our contracts administrator, will be reviewing the process for you.
Good evening. I am Tina Yoke. I have the pleasure of being the manager of VTA's Procurement Contracts and Materials Management Department, and I'm joined this evening by Thomas Esch, VTA's Construction Contracts Administration Manager, and we're going to do two brief presentations for you. I'll be doing the first part of the presentation to provide some information on giving you general procurement overview, as well as discussing some risks in the procurement process, supply chain, when we're purchasing goods primarily. So, starting off with the procurement overview, the Procurement Contracts and Materials Management Department is responsible for the centralized procurement function at VTA, and also responsible for materials management, warehouse management functions. There's currently approximately 400 active contracts that are valued at a minimum threshold of $150,000 and greater. All of the 400 contracts combined total $513 million, and this is for a one-year term. Several of our contracts are multi-year contracts with options, so if we were to include the options, we would really be looking at currently over $2 billion of contracting. The breakdown of the types of contracts are listed below. In the materials management section of VTA, there are 6 storerooms, warehouses that provide operational support, primarily parts and light rail supply of parts. There are approximately 75,000 parts at the 6 storeroom warehouses, and our current inventory value is approximately $30 million. So continuing with the procurement overview, VTA's competitive bid threshold is $3,500, and what that means is that's the dollar amount at which we need to start soliciting the bid process, receiving quotes. VTA's formal procurement bid threshold is $150,000 or greater. An example of a recent formal procurement is the purchase of the 5 Proterra electric buses that would be with an option of 20 buses, 20 additional buses that will be coming to this board next month. Some of the common procurement solicitation methods used is VTA issues our own bid solicitations. We package that, go out and get bids. A second common type of procurement is to have our agency partner with another agency and do a joint procurement. And one that's not listed there is a negotiated procurement, and a very recent example of where a negotiated and joint, it's a negotiated joint procurement example, is the VTA grant funding that our agency was successful in obtaining for the partnership with Proterra for 5 electric buses, completely different than the previous example, is one of the examples of that type of a solicitation. The expenditure of public funds in the government contracting process is structured with regulatory compliance of many state and federal parameters. Some of the requirements are listed below. For state requirements, there are government codes, public utility codes, public contract codes specific to VTA itself is listed in that particular reference code section. And then we have to comply with many federal requirements. The FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulatory Regulations, of course FTA, our highway projects, FHWA, and then FEMA. So transitioning to the procurement supply chain risk. In 2014, the University of Tennessee surveyed 150 of the largest types of corporations in a variety of sectors providing goods and services that did procurement out with companies outside of the U.S. And what they found is tallied here. Moving from left to right, the top risk was quality concerns, an inability to absolutely have control over a manufacturing process because there's limited ability to do site inspections and just, again, control the entire manufacturing process to the same extent that you might be able to with a contractor located inside the U.S. And then, again, moving left to right are the other listed concerns there. Higher inventory is the second listed concern, and that's because a lot of companies may factor into a longer lead time a greater inventory that they have to stock. And again, moving left to right, there are some of the other listed concerns there. VTA has many of these shared risks that was noted in this study in the private sector. But for VTA, some specific risks are that both of our light rail and our bus contracts require quite a bit of manufacturing for parts and maintenance with contractors that have some or all of the component manufacturing located outside of the U.S. So some of these examples, again, for component part manufacturing is Kinki Sharyo. That is the name of the manufacturer for light rail cars. They're based in Japan. Alstrom is our transmission vendor. They're based in France. And Knorr Brakes, who is our light rail brake vendor, is located in Germany. So factors of enhanced risk to VTA. At the top is sole sourcing, and that's because once our agency makes a procurement decision, we're locked into that vendor. we don't necessarily have any knowledge of whether there is a sub-supplier that they will make known to VTA, because many times these parts are stamped with the manufacturer's name, and then they will put their part numbers on that. On the bus side, for new procurements, we are really trying to make a concerted effort